Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Thank you for joining us. Today I'm here, I'm Peter Vines, Managing Director of Ray White Commercial, and I'm joined by
Mark Bernberg.
Thank you. I'd almost forgotten your name. We just wanted to get in front of everybody today and I guess talk about what we're seeing in the market, talk about what we believe is holding up the current market, but also the signs that we're seeing in terms of that potentially, starting to accelerate into the future,
100%.
and that the future looks incredibly bright. All of this is predicated on our Western Sydney Insight series. We've just released the new residential development version, which we'd love to send you a copy of. So we'll send you a link after this webinar. If you'd like to subscribe, please do. We have received a number of questions already, which we will answer at the end. Should anybody wish to ask any questions during this presentation, please feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll answer them at the end. Alternatively, if you don't wish to ask them in a public forum, that's okay as well. You're more than welcome to contact Mark and I afterwards for any further information.
For sure.
I feel like I'm having deja vu. It's really weird. Okay. All right. I've got the clicker. I couldn't work that out last time. Let's have another go. Okay. So today's agenda. Many of you will have already had a chance to read this, so I'm just going to skip right through this. There's my pretty face. There's a nice 3D render. So what's driving Western Sydney? I always say to people, go where the money's going, go where the people are going. Where else would you want to be? I think if you look across Western Sydney, we talk about the future being bright. You cannot have the amount of money poured into infrastructure like we've had in terms of a new airport coming, one of the largest hospital precincts in the country.
It's once in a generational.
Absolutely.
It really is.
It really is. The incredible immigration that we're seeing and the kinds of immigration that we're seeing, particularly from, Nepalese and Indian background, who they want to go toward their communities, which are Chinese as well. They're wanting to go where their communities are already established. They've got the social infrastructure there. And so we're seeing many of those new immigrants. And the numbers are massive.
Massive. So over the last decade, we've averaged about 250,000 as net migration into Australia. That number the last 2 years has been close on 550,000. So, it's double. Yes, we're making up for obviously closing the borders during COVID, but the projections, Matusich also came out recently with projections and he says it's going to continue to grow. So
particularly under a Labor government, we typically see heavier immigration. But again, we've seen that particularly in, the Charter-Kramer studies that they've done, they talk about, an immigrant's journey into Australia in that first 5 years, where they will live or buy an apartment.
70% of migrants, according to Charter-Kramer, in their first 5 years in Australia will rent or own an apartment.
Yep.
So huge demand being placed now on particularly apartment infrastructure.
Yeah, agree. Also the student population, absolutely massive. We've got something like a record 600,000 students in Australia at the moment. 48,500 foreign students attend Western Sydney University, which, these numbers, it really is driving that growth and that demand. You look at some of the figures of the gross regional product coming out of Western Sydney, 1.69 billion. The amount of wealth and economy that we have is quite phenomenal and continues to grow. So population. Look at that. Those figures really speak for themselves.
Massive. Especially that last line, 56% of New South Wales' future population is projected to go to Western Sydney. We were joking yesterday when we were running through this that, if you looked at the domestic or international arrival halls and you take all the tourists out, nearly 2/3 of the people that are immigrating are going to end up in Western Sydney.
Yep.
That's 2 out of 3 people. It's crazy.
It is.
So you think about all this population moving into Western Sydney, the infrastructure is being built to support it. As we said, once in a generation now.
Yep.
Metros, airports, light rails, hospitals.
Yep.
But, where are these people going to live?
That's the big scary question. Okay, so these are some of the stats that we want to talk about. It's super interesting. I mean, supply and demand, right? That's what we're talking about here. So population growth. We've talked about the projections for population growth. But from 2022 to 2024, we've gone from a population of 2.6 to 2.8 million people. It's massive.
Massive.
That is massive growth. Western Sydney needs approximately 24,000 new dwellings annually. Currently under construction in Western Sydney, there's 5,400 units under construction.
So just think about that for a moment. So we're saying you need 24,000 homes annually, and we're doing 5,000
Currently.
So, you say to yourself, well, construction seems to keep declining, and there's many reasons for that, but population keeps rising and they're moving to Western Sydney. Where are they going to live?
We're setting up for something massive.
Massive.
It's and also I think what's really interesting is the trends that we're seeing, particularly around affordability, right? And people moving away from, the Australian dream of owning a home to either owning an apartment, or alternatively, always being renters, right? Which is, I think, a huge thing in the future from an investment perspective. I think rental is really a big thing moving forward. But I think you can see the thematic that we're talking about in terms of drivers.
And then it's basic supply and demand economics.
Absolutely.
So if there is no supply and demand keeps rising, if you were to put them over as a graph, price has to go up.
Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. So the
Mark's
economic
pretty
drivers.
face.
There's my pretty face, one of the projects we've
Jordan
been
Spring.
selling. So many
This
people
is a
talk
really-
about the property clock.
TikTok.
And this is something Matusich also taps on quite a lot. And the property clock is meant because property is very cyclical, or cyclical, however you want to say it. And it continuously turns. So it will go through upswings, downswings. And right now, if we had to look at that picture that's on screen there, Sydney, and particularly Western Sydney, is probably at around 8 o'clock over there. So in a massive recovery. There is no doubt at the moment. Nerida Coinsby put out some information recently that now all markets are slowly rising, green shoots across the board. And if we think about what is driving, so what drives people to be in property? First of all, consumer confidence.
Yep.
People have to believe have a confidence in the economy and a confidence in the housing market. Recently, that's just gone up.
Yes.
And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But uplift in housing activity. Well, we've just said migrants coming into Australia look to own or rent apartments.
Yeah.
Apartments sit at the lower end of the price cohort of housing. And there's definitely been a movement in the last couple of years. We've seen it in projects from people being unable to afford houses, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom houses, and now starting to, at first begrudgingly, but now more and more proactively look at the apartment asset class as an opportunity.
Yep.
And so, you've got migrants and owner-occupiers and first-home buyers all now playing in a very thin band of new apartments or new opportunities. And with sustained migration growth and Western Sydney growth, again, the property market is now in a basis where it's starting to swing up, and every metric we're seeing says that at some point in time, now this could be 6 months, it could be 12 months, it could be 18 months, there is a boom coming. There has to be. There just has to be.
I think it really, and again, if you look at that property clock that we're talking about, I mean, we like the cycle. I think everybody's been waiting for this interest rate to come off.
Yeah,
we've now had two interest rate drops.
that's right.
We have further projections within the presentation around that. But that has to be the beginning, right?
That, without doubt, that is the spark that we believe will fuel the embers that will eventually lead to a roaring property fire. There's absolutely no doubt.
Click.
So one of the major factors that's obviously behind the interest rates, which is, as we know, the gunshot that we believe sets the race off, is inflation. And it's very clear as day that the government jumped on this quickly.
Yes.
They were very restrictive, and let's be honest, a lot of households are suffering with the interest rate rises. That we had the sharpest cumulative rate rise in Australian history. Took a lot of people by surprise because originally the government was saying, the Reserve Bank was saying, hey, we won't raise rates till 24. Then in 22, they raised them 12 times in a row. which, again, took a lot of people by surprise, but it worked. There's no doubt about it. It worked. And look, COVID was a once, not even in a generation, I suppose, a once in a century maybe event. Let's hope. That happened, and it really threw the economy out, and it threw inflation out globally. But they can see, as you can see there, inflation has been downward trending. The government believes that it's now starting to be within the band, that 2 to 3% that they want.
Yeah. And,
the risk, obviously, if the Reserve Bank leaves that for too long, is that we move into a recession and then we're in a downward cyclical spiral. But I think certainly the 2 rate cuts now have reversed that process.
Yeah.
But as you can see, if inflation is coming down and it's clear that it is coming down, that is the impetus for the Reserve Bank to go, right, it's time now to potentially ease
a little bit further.
And you cannot click to the next one. You cannot emphasize how important. It's consumer sentiment. I thought we were talking interest rates, but
we love sentiment.
We'll go to sentiment first.
Let's go there.
Inflation starts to come down. People start to read about it, that it's coming down. The government starts to intimate, okay, we're going to start to reduce rates.
Yeah.
People, we're seeing an opportunity. And then it comes down to how do consumers feel about the economy. And property is one of those asset classes that is dominated by consumer sentiment.
Absolutely. It's all driven by confidence, by fear of missing out, by following.
100%.
Yeah.
And we're great to see now. Well, the media, I mean, that's either property's either dropping by 40% or it's going to rise by 50%, and they never ever get it right.
No.
It's amazing. I mean, I'd love the job.
I love when Harry Chigabov comes into the market. He says the market's about to run, and then it runs.
Then it runs.
It's like a self-fulfilling
with the analysts
prophecy.
going, no, but it's going to drop by 50%.
No, it's going up.
But consumer confidence has stabilized now. We're seeing this globally. A lot of people call it maybe even the Trump effect. There's a feeling of optimism. There's a feeling, well, in America that's it, but maybe some other countries are feeling differently. But certainly in Australia, I think also, don't downplay the fact that the government has remained the same, and I think a bit of stability.
Yeah, it's huge.
We see it in every property cycle. Before a major election, everybody just sits.
Yep.
We saw it from the highest of property values down to entry-level apartments in lower end suburbs.
Nobody wants to make a decision.
We've had the election. The government's stable. Policies are looking good for first-time buyers. Labor have made a huge deal about housing.
Yep.
And for us, consumer sentiment is the winds that drive the ember into a flame.
Winds beneath my wings.
Winds beneath my wings. Let us wind and sail onto the next slide.
Click.
Now, the one we've wanted to talk about. So, interest rate. We've spoken about how interest rate is the fire, the spark that lights it all. And, people were waiting for downward trending interest rate environments. Some people have jumped on that boat really quickly. We've seen a major uptake in buyer interest and in sales.
All of my friends in residential, even the numbers coming through their property, the inquiries, they've all, since the second rate cut, they've started to increase.
We've seen it. We saw it on a launch this weekend where we did more sales than we thought we were going to do. There was a cut just the week before. So, what's amazing about this is you almost now get 2 bands of people. You get the band now that can see this is coming and are jumping in now. And you still get that cohort who are, no, we're just going to wait to see rates come down. And what this is going to do, without any doubt, is this is going to drive the established and the new residential market up.
Yes.
Every one of the major 4 banks are trending that interest rates will continue to drop. In fact, NAB seem to be the most bullish of them all. I think they're predicting somewhere between 2.6 and 2.8 by the middle of next year. That's another potentially 125 basis points or 1.25% from where we are now.
And that's a super interesting stat because we further on in the presentation, we talk about serviceability and borrowing capacity, which has been one of the major challenges.
Major blockers. So you've got interest rates trending down and every one of the major 4 banks and all the economists are saying going to continue to trend down, the 90-day yield curve pointing down.
Yep.
So we would assume that it's fair that there's a high probability rates continue to drop. As rates continue to drop, this fuels the property market because people are now buying into downward trending rates rather than potentially the uncertainty of upward trending rates.
Yeah.
So without a doubt, we feel this is probably the main economic driver that will lift the residential market. And as the established market...
This really, as well as the government initiatives to help people get into housing, is a game changer. Right?
Changer. It's a game changer for everybody. It's a game changer for all the developers
Yeah.
that are hi to all of you that are on this webinar.
Click.
You know, well, let's click.
Okay, let's see what's next.
Let's see what's next. Very exciting.
Oh,
okay.
Here we go.
So it's kind of like we can join the dots now in case any of you were lost.
Yes.
So borrowing capacity has been one of the biggest blockers to residential purchases.
Because what's really interesting is, and I know you and I have spoken about this a lot, is the inquiry levels, people are there, they want to buy, right?
Correct.
And we do think that the numbers of people wanting to buy will get higher, but one of the biggest issues that you've seen is serviceability, right? They come, they inquire, but then the moment they go and speak to a broker,
all over.
It's all game over.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because, I think we keep seeing these stats in the media of, every interest rate drop will save you $113 on your mortgage or whatever it is. People must remember also only 1/3 of the Australian population has a mortgage.
Yes.
The stats are, it's ballpark, but the stats are 1/3 has a mortgage, 1/3 rents, 1/3 doesn't have a mortgage.
Baby boomers.
Baby boomers. So we are more interested in the people that don't have a mortgage yet, potentially looking to enter the market. And for them, it's not about how much they're going to save, it's how much more can they borrow.
Yes.
And one of the stats we found was that for every 0.25% or 25 basis points drop in interest rates on an average mortgage of about $800,000,
yep,
you can add another $50,000 in borrowing capacity. So let's just let this sink in for a moment here. So if we did see another 1% drop in interest rates over the, let's say, next 12 months, for somebody that's in the market right now, if they could borrow right now $600,000, that means ballpark, again, all the brokers online, we're just giving averages here. In a year's time, they should be able to borrow nearly $850,000. That is the difference between someone getting in and being able to buy a 1, or maybe a 2, to now looking at a 2 or a 3 bedroom. It's huge.
But also, particularly in Western Sydney, where the margins are low and prices really haven't done anything for the past 10 years, this is the moment we've been waiting for.
Correct. And if you think about it, we're speaking about migration.
Yeah.
We're speaking about migrants wanting to rent or own an apartment.
Yeah.
Therefore, we believe it's our thematic that rentals will continue to rise, particularly in the apartments, particularly in the lower end of the apartment market.
The affordability. It's still
affordability.
going to be about affordability,
and
right?
that market is the most sensitive to potentially these rate drops and the borrowing capacity.
And the confidence that comes with when the rates drop and people start
correct, because now suddenly all your friends are buying and your family members, and the minute an Uber driver is telling you it's time to get into the market, it's too late.
You're already at 12 o'clock.
Correct.
Property
You're at 12 o'clock. So here is Pete and I, your Uber drivers, telling you, hey, get in.
But get in early.
Get in early.
Yeah. Scammers. Okay.
This is a big one.
These are some of the other really interesting.
And I think this is also important for developers because I know developers over the last 2-3 years, we speak to them every single day. They've been gun shy.
Yep.
And rightly so. Construction costs were up 40%. Yep. Interest rates were up the highest they'd been. It's a very difficult market.
The planning process.
Red tape.
The building commissioner trying to get across what's happening with that.
Unbelievable.
Tax after tax after tax.
But this Labor government really wants now to incentivize people to get into the property market, to relieve some of the rental strain that you read these horror stories about people camping out in caravan parks because they can't get into the rental market because developers can't build enough because of red tape and costs to free up more stock.
Yep.
This is very interesting because what the government's Help to Buy scheme is really the government saying, hey, we'll help you get into the market. We will be like the bank of mom and dad, because not everybody has a bank of mom and dad or a bank of grandpa and grandma now, which seems to be more and more prevalent. And really what the government's saying is, look, traditionally, if we looked at an $800,000 house, if you were a first-home buyer, maybe you can get in on $40,000. You can get one of those first-home deposit schemes and you can get in for 5%. So you need $40,000 deposit, but then you still got to service a $760,000 mortgage. With this scheme, the government allows you to get in for only 2%. So you only need $16,000 in savings, which I know is still a lot for some people, but still it's way more manageable.
Way more manageable than 20%.
100%. And the second thing is that because the government would then maybe take up to 40% of the equity and the mortgage, not only can you get in for $16,000, but then you don't have a mortgage of $760, you've got a mortgage of $480. And in a lowering interest rate environment, this makes it far, far more accessible to the migrants, to the first home buyers, to even owner occupiers, who have been, renting, looking to try and get into something of their own. This is massive.
There won't have been a better time. I mean,
No.
Like prices will have gone up, but it's also
Correct.
great time.
And Labor's gone even further than this, is that, up till now we had the first home owners deposit scheme that allowed a first home buyer to buy a property with only 5% down, incur no lender's mortgage insurance, and the government made 50,000 of those available every year. Now they've said, okay, any first home buyer, 5% down, get into the market.
Yeah.
And with the Help to Buy scheme, we believe this should be giving developers great confidence that you're bringing a project now into downward trending environment where costs, from what we're hearing from all the builders, seem to have plateaued. They're not coming down, but they're not rising at the rate they were.
And anecdotally, some of the raw materials apparently coming back.
Amazing.
Labor, no, but certainly some of the raw materials are starting to come back.
It's great.
Which I think, we'll talk about it later, but people need to get in and start buying sites now.
Correct.
Because they need to be running planning.
Yeah.
Because in 12 months' time,
there is a boom coming.
It's coming.
No doubt.
Click.
The
power of data.
The power of data. I think, again, we have
Tell me about this data, Mark.
Data. We have a lot of developers on the call here, and I think one of the things that should give you more surety is that, we at Ray White Projects and Ray White Commercial, we're obsessed with data. We're absolutely obsessed with data, and I've never been in a business where, and to your credit, your whole team, always going through the data, from marketing to sales to the analysts that are in the team, everybody's looking at data. And we believe that actually the time has come for developers also to be looking at that data. We've developed technology that is exclusive to our agency that allows developers to have more sales, demand, and price-related data that can give them more confidence to say, hey, I think we should launch. I think we should come to market. I think we should build more stock. And we've seen this data play out in two exceptionally great case studies in differing areas. One as Western Sydney gets, all the way out in sunny Jordan Springs.
Beautiful.
For those of you who don't know, it's a little bit sort of 10 minutes from Penrith.
Great land lease master plan community.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I always joke when people give me a hard time, but once you get out there and you're out there, it is
great amenity.
Of that area. You on a man-made lake, there's, when we've been out there, there's always bird noises and moms and people walking their dogs.
The pram, and it's a real lifestyle.
Fantastic. And, we've done exceptionally well there by plowing into the data and really using that data to better understand the demographics of the buyers. And then, as far adrift then as Lower North Shore and Lane Cove. We recently launched a project just last year with new technology exclusive to our agency that gave the developers for the first time ever a really detailed insight, almost a heat map into what was going on in the building before they launched, so that we were able to bring just the right stock to the market, get just the right amount of momentum, and blew them out of the water, the developer, with which was a risky project, bringing 50 brand new apartments to the market at the same time. Nailed it.
Yeah.
The power of data.
Absolutely. And I think, look, I feel like, particularly in the development industry, we've always done things the same way, and we go off a gut feel and we go off, agent feedback, but I think with AI and with the power of data that we now have, we can be making far more educated decisions than just relying on one person who's got their finger on the pulse, who may or may not be a genius, who just understands that sort of that sales curve. And it's really about kind of understanding what those data points are to move.
This whole presentation really is data, right? So we bring out the Western Sydney Residential Development Report. We do it quarterly, I think, just about. And again, that is just full of data. And we want to be able to have sit downs and chats with our developers to show them that we have levels of data now that no other agency has. I can guarantee and very confidently say that, particularly with the technology that we have, it's all backed by AI. We're using it in our business every single day. And really the point of this webinar was to say to developers that there's a lot of data points in the market right now that are pointing towards certainly green shoots everywhere and a significant housing recovery.
And what's so funny? I remember in 2010 when I started in Western Sydney, nothing worked. And I remember, having development sites and people looking at me sideways going, mate, don't worry about it. Like, there's no point. It doesn't work.
We'll get back to you.
We'll come back to you. Yeah. They never came back to me. Call me back, please. But it's really funny, right? Because I feel like history is repeating itself, and it's not a surprise. But you have that time frame where nothing works, it's flat, prices don't work, and then all of a sudden, everybody starts, both developers and buyers start coming into the market, and they're like scrambling.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually believe that now is very much the right time, particularly for developers. There's a lot of government programs out there at the moment, particularly from a planning perspective. The HDA, the TODs, the LMRs, get in and do planning. Sales, it may or may not be the right time to launch a project, but certainly it's the right time to be working on planning and getting your sites ready, so that when the market does turn, and it is going to turn, and it's going to turn very quick and very hard, we really need to be ready.
100%. Yeah. I mean, we sat with 2 developers, I think it was 2 days ago, and they're not ready to bring something to market yet, but they're sitting down with us and planning and strategizing, and they've got options. And so when that spark erupts and when the market moves, you're not then running around at the last minute trying to figure out, are you launching right? Have you got the right product mix? Is this a good product market fit?
Yeah.
Come to us, come and sit with us. We've got multiple pieces of technology that no other agency has that will allow you to get quantitative data to be able to make better informed decisions. And that's, if you're making really well-informed decisions in a fast-moving market, you've got a much higher probability of success. Success on your project, success on your sales, success on the amount of GR you can achieve.
Absolutely. Okay, click. Questions. Okay, well, look, let's, I'll click again. Click. Let's go into some of these pre-submitted questions
You'll
first.
have to read these.
I will, because no, they're too small for your eyes. You should see Mark's phone. It's got that jumbo text. It's like 04. Slide up.
We're airing our dirty laundry now, are we?
Okay. What unit typologies are proving most popular in today's market, and how is this influencing buyer decisions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think traditionally, certainly in my years when I was at A-Land, the 2-bedroom was
the be-all and end-all.
The be-all and end-all. It was always 70%. What we've noticed a lot is in the last year or two, the 1-bedroom plus study has made a roaring comeback.
Affordability.
Yeah. It's that 60 square meters maybe, so it's not a 50 square meter 1-bed. It's not a 75 2-bed. A lot of professional working couples going, we don't really need a second bathroom, but we love the second room for a study, a nursery, or whatever it might be, a media room, games room. So we've seen a lot of interest in that 1-bed plus study. And what we say to developers is it gives buyers choice, because you can come in now at 1-bed at 50, 1 plus study at 60, 2-bed, starting at maybe 72, 73. So different entry points for affordability.
Yes.
But I would say the biggest change we've seen is at the upper size end of the scale, 3 bedrooms and even 4 bedrooms.
Yep.
And that is down to affordability again, where I think the dream of I want a 1/4 acre, I want a 5-bedroom townhouse or a 4-bedroom townhouse is just unreachable now, unfortunately, for a lot of Australians.
And multi-generational, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So they, particularly as we spoke about the Indian, the Nepalese community, where the older generation likes to live together as a family. And so that larger 3-bedroom, I even saw an article, I think it was a newspaper 2 weeks ago, about how larger 4 bedrooms are now starting to also become in demand, which you never saw 3, 4, 5 years ago.
No.
So,
and you wouldn't want to put look, depending on the area that you're in, you're not going to do your whole building with that, but certainly a mix to appeal to some of those
100%.
larger family groups.
And again, for all the developers listening, we've got these data points. Love to sit down with you and have a look at the mix and show you how you can actually scale it out. But definitely on the smaller and the larger end, we've seen a lot more movement.
Okay, next one. Are you seeing interest in off the plan or finished product more? Are there as many downsizers as there were?
It's interesting.
Really, I guess it depends from project to project.
It does,
right?
area to area as well.
To area,
Look, traditionally, I think the last 24 months have been very tough for off the plan.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's any off the plan agency out there that could say it's been, rosy, sunny, shiny days.
Yeah.
The downsizers are an interesting market because quite often they are a dual transaction. So they need to get rid of their home and buy the next one. Downsizers traditionally also very nervous,
It's all about confidence.
Very slow to move.
Yeah.
So for them, sometimes the off the plan is too daunting. They
Yes.
can't see it, they can't touch it, they can't feel it. It's too far away. They don't know how to transact. So
When do they sell? When do they,
So you see the downsizers really coming into the project in its last cycle as it's moving towards completion. Definitely still huge demand, certainly in Lower North Shore, certain pockets. But I would say that, for off the plan where it becomes really amazing right now, and I would be saying this to any investor and any first-time buyer, we cannot be more certain that we don't know when, but it's coming. A boom is coming. The property market is rising. All markets are rising right now. For the opportunity to buy off the plan, and maybe it's 2 years away, and with things like co-posit, afford assist, and all of those, you can literally buy an apartment for $10,000, pay a couple of $100 every week, and ride the market up, and only look to either get a mortgage or on sell in 2 years' time. For me, that just makes perfect sense. It's the most risk-free way of letting the market do the heavy lifting for you. And right now, the market will do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, and it's so important from a speculator's perspective when they get in the market, right? Because if you get in at the wrong time.
Correct.
Yeah.
If you wait 2 years or 3 years, and then you have 2 years to wait, I can't tell you what the market's going to do in 5 years, but
it's all really. I think it's really the next 12 months, which is that really interesting time, right? Particularly for buyers.
Yeah.
I mean, not developers, but individual buyers, because they really want to get in before everybody else starts getting in and has more affordability. And
100%. I've spoken to a lot of project marketing businesses, and they all say the same thing. The last 2 years, demand has been there. The leads are coming.
Yeah.
They just can't afford it.
I think, and you and I have talked about this a lot, I think there really is still strong demand for like built product. I mean, I know myself, when I decide I want to buy, I don't want to wait. I'm impatient. The same way when I order something off the Iconic, I want it there the next day or within 2 days. I think real estate is no different, right? When I decide that I'm going to buy something, I really want to go in, I want to touch, I want to feel. So I think there's a real opportunity for those developers, particularly who have pulled the trigger without as many pre-sales.
Yeah.
As the market picks up, this built stock, I think, is going to be really kind of very sought after.
I agree. We saw it in that last project that we had up on there, which was Sterling. We launched that 3 months before the whole project was completing.
Yeah.
And yes, some people, they need more time for a deposit. They're not ready yet, but there are a lot, and we sold to a lot of downsizers there where, they now know there's a 3 month window. They're going to list their property.
It's
and
perfect.
They have a little bit more certainty of the time frame.
And I think particularly with some of the issues that we've had around new builders, to be able to see and touch it is a massive thing.
Huge. Huge.
Okay. This is one for me maybe. What are you seeing with large-scale residential development site transactions? Well, there's virtually none of them. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, we've just been through it over the last 40 minutes. Development has been exceptionally difficult, particularly in Western Sydney, where the build costs have been incredibly high. We've seen a lot of interest in subdivision, townhouse, owner-occupier stock. We are very big believers in the residential apartment market, and that the site market will very much come back, particularly like within the next 12 months. I think it's actually a really good time to go out and put your foot on stuff. You're going to get better terms. You get a longer settlement, sometimes, options if the right opportunity arises, if an owner can get the right price. But certainly now's the time to be going in and locking those in. But there really has been, very few major transactions. But I do think that will change in the next 6 or 12 months. Are we seeing strong demand from investors or owner-occupiers right now? And what's driving the trend?
It's interesting. Talking to the residential side, investors did disappear for a little while. I think, interest rates rising that fast, that sharply, significantly impacted yields.
Yeah.
And certainly, for some investors, flipped it from positive cash flow to negative. We are definitely seeing investors come back. We launched a big project just last weekend, and it was a huge investor demand. I think they are seeing, as I said, the yield curve is downward trending. They can see interest rates are coming down. I don't believe that rentals are, going to suddenly start deflating. There's just not enough stock. There's so much migration coming in.
Yeah.
So I think investors are starting to wake up to the opportunity that a rising rental market with a lowering interest rate
You
environment.
should actually get a decent return, and then you should get your capital growth as well.
100%.
Yeah.
Now's the opportunity to really get both. So we're definitely seeing stronger interest from investors, particularly investors who can buy a product for $10,000, keep their powder dry, pay off that 10% deposit they would have to put in anyway over 2 years and ride the market. It starts to become a smart investment decision.
Yes.
So we are seeing the growth curve in investors is upward trending.
Is there expected to be further government stimulus or incentives to target investors?
I hope so.
Yeah.
We need to.
Yeah, I think it's a really, coming back to it, I think it's a really interesting trend is that we're seeing, maybe the new generation won't be buying properties, not until maybe they get their inheritance. But there's a whole change away from I must own a property to I must live my life and I must travel and I must do all of these things. And I think fundamentally, many people won't be able to afford to own. And that's just the way the world is. I mean, the rest of the world, Europe,
Correct.
The US, people don't all own their property.
Go to New York, not most
Huge.
people rent.
Yeah. And so I think there's a huge market for that moving forward. I think build to rent will fill some of that, although, the returns are still kind of questionable to a degree with that. But the government is making concessions around, holding costs and land tax to try and encourage that further. We haven't seen a lot of activity from those groups lately, but there has to be an investor product to encourage investors so that we can provide that housing to the people who just will never own or don't want
100%. If government wants to tackle the housing crisis, they can't rely on developers alone.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
and say, developers, you've got to build all of it. They've got to have an environment where they're incentivizing ordinary people like you and I to go, I'll pick up an investment product and I'll help now create more housing, but getting a good return. But it is going to take some sort of benefit or stimulus from the government. And let's be honest, they're doing a fantastic job at the moment when it comes to first home buyers and trying to get that next generation in.
Yeah, you don't. I don't want to say it has been building for a long time, even in terms of the planning system. Part of the reason we've got a housing crisis is because we couldn't get planning through for years. I mean, for years.
I was talking to a developer the other day and he said, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, from the time you bought a site to the time you could settle was maximum 2.5, maybe 3 years. Now it's 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
And the build time's only 18 to 24 months.
Yeah.
The rest of it is red tape.
Absolutely.
Nonsense.
Yeah. Okay, we've spoken a lot today. I'm sure most people are sick of hearing us. Are there any additional questions that have come through?
One's come through. Someone's just said, I find it interesting how much effort government is incentivizing more high density living in Sydney by Todd, etc. When you look at high density areas like Walleye Creek, Rhodes, Macquarie Park, Ryde, Olympic Park, there is very little capital growth in the past 10 years, and sometimes negative growth. So my question is, why encourage more of the same high-rise development when people generally want to buy house and land, or at least townhouses with small backyards?
It's a very good question. I think it comes down to amenity and infrastructure. I mean, the density around infrastructure makes a huge amount of sense. The government is putting in this infrastructure. I think one of the things it's all about, again, it comes back to supply and demand, right? So, if you have huge amounts of rezoning, it can impact on the price. And so it is important when people are buying off the plan to be looking at stuff like that as well.
Sure.
If that's a real concern, you need to be looking at those areas where perhaps there's not as much supply. I mean, Castle Hill, Macquarie Park, there is a significant amount of supply. At some point that supply runs out. But you have to also look at, like Macquarie Park, for example, you've got the university, you've got, a very short distance back to the city. You've got the metro
stations.
You've got one of the best sub-regional, shopping centres.
Macquarie Park will be the 4th biggest CBD by 2030 behind Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane.
Yeah.
And to also state on that thing, one thing I would say is that, Australia is an island. There's only so much land.
Yes.
As much as we would like to continue living that dream of everybody having their own sort of backyard and house, and there's only so much land.
Oh, and we're also hemmed in by the Blue Mountains.
Correct.
And
So-
there's servicing issues. So we can't just keep sprawling out, right? Or down. There's
Correct.
natural constraints around Sydney, which mean that we actually need to go up.
Correct. And you know what? I would also say to the person who put that question, it's a great question, by the way, but there also are other high density areas. You think about Zetland. If you'd bought in Zetland in what, 2014 or 2015, you've made a lot of money.
Yep.
So I would also suggest that, in property, it's always markets within markets within markets.
Yep.
And not every high density area is going to stagnate or decline in capital value.
Mm-hmm.
It also depends. For example, the Olympic Parks also had a couple of issues with one or two of the towers there that has a monumental impact on people's perception of that area, consumer confidence.
Yes. I think Sydney Olympic Park is one of the greatest areas moving into the future. Once the metro comes through in 2032, that is an absolute game changer.
You've got everything there.
Absolutely.
Everything that you would need.
You've got
So-
lifestyle,
I do think it's a good point, and a lot of times investors will say, stay away from off-the-plan property. I would say that for the first-time investors getting in who maybe don't have the capital to go and buy a one-bedroom apartment in Bondi or a one-bedroom apartment in Zetland, the opportunity to at least get into the property market and start building wealth through property, off-the-plan does give you that opportunity.
Yep.
And it does give you, I wouldn't say build your entire portfolio with it.
No.
In the same way, I wouldn't say put everything into Bitcoin, some of it. But I think that it does allow people that opportunity, and different areas will appreciate and decline in different ways. Good question, though.
Thank you. Good. Okay. I think that's about us done. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We hope that it's been insightful. As you can tell, we're very bullish about the future, and we truly are passionate about property development, about sales, about Western Sydney and the development market in Sydney. We are very close to something big, and the market really running. You only need to look at what's occurring in Sydney and New South Wales to see that it's coming. And I think really around that interest rate piece and the government stimulus that's coming in, these are the real drivers that will unlock the property market moving forward. So get in and buy now. Do your planning. Come and talk to Mark about data points and what sort of stock you should be putting into the market. And if we can ever do anything to assist you, please feel free to reach out. But happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Have a great weekend.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to us rant. We have plenty more ranting. We're going to just chat for another hour or so once we've turned off the mic. So, yeah.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have fun out there.
Thank you.